Some food to keep them here. Our other older female here is Pawn Tip. Pawn Tip is 29 years of age. Her name in Thai means gift from heaven, and she is a little bit more identifiable from Taronga. She's a bit darker in colour, a lot more hair on the top of the head and along the back there. Asian elephants are quite synonymous with how hairy they are by comparison to their African cousins. They also, you might notice on all of our elephants, female, or the older females especially, the depigmentation around the ears, top of the legs, and on patches on their face, and that is something else that separates them from African elephants as well. We'll get into a little bit more about features a bit later on in the talk. But the larger of the two calves you can see in front of you, the one with the tusks here, directly in front of you is Sabai. Sabai made headlines back on the 2nd of November 2016 when he became the first elephant calf born here in Dubbo. His mother, Tongdi, made headlines back in 2009 with her first calf, Lukchai, down in Sydney, and she's the very first elephant to have given birth here in Australia. First elephant arrived here in 1852. It took until 2009 for the first elephant calf to be born. That was Sabai's older brother, Lukchai, who's recently been sent down to Melbourne Zoo to become their breeding bull in the decades to come. So he's having a wonderful time down there, away from the family herd with 4 unrelated females, and is putting in lots of practice. And hopefully we will get some encouraging news from them, in the months and years to come. Now, Sabai, so about 4.5, what is he now? Definitely 4.5 now. My maths serves me well. And we hope that, you see him running the other young female calf around today, because Pawn Tip is cycling at the moment. So all the boys are a little bit on edge at the moment. So you don't be alarmed if you see Sabai running Canlea around. It's good activity and exercise for her, but Canlea is the one that got her backside to us at the moment, certainly not her best side, and Canlea was the second calf that was born here in Dubbo, and she is fast approaching her 3rd birthday on the 14th of June of this year. She is Pawn Tip's second calf. Both of these elephants have had 2 calves, one each in Sydney and one each here in Dubbo. Pawn Tip's first calf is Paddy Hahn. You might be able to see him meandering about through that tree line there. He's quite dark in colour, but you might notice the tusks as an elephant gets older certainly get bigger. And he was born on the 10th of March 2010, so just celebrated his 11th birthday. And we also have another larger bull, Gung, who is the father of Sabai, in a paddock over the back of the barns today. So he might be in another one of these paddocks later this afternoon for those who are making some subsequent trips around the circuit a bit later on. And they're the 6 individuals that we have here out in Dubbo. Now, as most of you would know, elephants are the largest land mammals on Earth. When we say this statement, we're technically referring to African elephants, who are the largest land mammals. Asian elephants are second. And they are very different from one another. Obviously they both evolved from a common ancestor, but we're much more closely related to chimpanzees than Asian and African elephants are to one another. Asian elephants are more closely related to woolly mammoths than they are African elephants, and as such they have many different features. But to sustain their large size, Asian elephant females like Pawn Tip and Tongdi will reach up to about 3,500, 3,700 kilos when fully grown. An Asian bull like Sabai, who has many decades to go before he reaches his full size, they can exceed 5,500 kilos when fully grown. And to give you some perspective of size, Pawn Tip here on your left hand side weighs 3,000 kilos currently. So still all have a little bit of growing left to do, obviously the younger calves especially. Now, to sustain their large size, elephants eat in excess of 150 kilos of food a day and can drink up to 120 litres of water. Their diet here at the zoo consists of 3 different types of hay, which we hang up in these hay bags. You can see hanging from the winch pole there, or some trees. We hang them in those bags to make it a little bit more difficult, a bit more challenging for the elephants to get those hay rations. For elephants of this age, those hay bags, it can take them up to around 30-35 minutes for them to finish those hay rations. Whereas if we just threw it on the ground, they'd be able to scoop it up in about 5 minutes and it would be done. Elephants can spend, depending on where they live, up to 16 hours a day searching and processing food to obviously fill out that large quantity that is required. And so it's an important job of ours to try and get our elephants sort of browsing and grazing regularly throughout the day. They can't obviously eat non-stop for 16 hours a day. We'd never fit them through the gates to get them out of the yard, but they obviously intersperse what we feed them with some of the natural grass that is growing around the exhibits. But on top of the hay that they get, they also get these pineapple plants, which we've just thrown out to them. We get them from Queensland, and they are a very important source of roughage in their diet, very good for their teeth and also for their digestive system. Other things like casuarina, currajong, elephant grass, and cocos palm is all part of the sort of the browse and hardy, woody sort of food that they eat. And in addition to that, they get other types of fruit and vegetables like apples, sweet potato, carrots and corn, etc. throughout the day. Now, there are many fascinating features about elephants, far too many to cover off in such a short talk, but I'll just point out a couple of features for you, and then if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I'll stick around for as long as anyone needs to answer any questions that you may have about elephants in general or about the ones you can see here in Dubbo. And starting off sort of just, at the front of the elephant where most of the action is, those ears of the elephants are a very fascinating adaptation. They are the second largest ears in the world, again only second behind the African elephants, who are around about double the size of an Asian elephant's ear, but they have both evolved to serve the same function, and that is to act as 2 giant cooling units in warm weather, which we certainly don't have right now. So you'll notice the elephants not requiring to flap their ears to keep cool. Now obviously they do a good job of channeling sound into the ear canal, have a very good sense of hearing as well as a good sense of smell. Their eyesight is better than other large mammals like rhino or buffalo, but certainly not as good as ours, and a wild elephant would certainly smell and hear you well before they can see you. But as I mentioned, those ears, the reason why they are so large is to act as 2 giant fans to keep them cool during very hot weather. In summertime here it can regularly get up to 40 degrees. And as I mentioned earlier in the talk, elephants can spend up to 16 hours a day grazing or browsing, looking for the volume of food that they require, up to around 150 kilos, depending on the age and size of the elephant. And obviously during that 16 hours or so, they spend quite a lot of time in the sun. Now, elephants do not have sweat glands like we do, so they're unable to regulate their body temperature very well when they warm up. That's one of the reasons why elephants love water and mud wallowing, because it helps regulate their body temperature and protects them from overheating. But in the absence of that, when they're obviously busy doing other things like processing all of that food, they also need to regulate their body temperature a little bit. So the blood supply in those ears is very important. There's a network of veins and arteries, and by flapping their ears, they're able to cool that blood down before it goes to other parts of the body. And then obviously, it constantly flows around. And we're not suggesting that knocks off the temperature by 5 or 10 degrees, sort of similar to your air conditioner in your car, for example, on a hot day. But it just buys them some time whilst they're out in the direct sunshine before they're able to retreat to shade in the real heat of the day, or make their way to a water hole or water source for a nice refreshing drink or a swim. Now, the most fascinating feature of an elephant is, of course, their trunk. It's probably the most fascinating appendage in the entire animal kingdom. It contains absolutely no bones or cartilage, but instead made up entirely of muscle. Our human bodies are made up of 640 muscles in total. An elephant's trunk has been found to contain over 40,000 muscles. They're very, very strong, but also very flexible and dexterous at the same time. You can see Sabai doing a good job of sweeping up some of the hay that's fallen out of that hay bag this morning, and you can see just how flexible that is, and that's on an elephant that's sort of 4 years of age. So he's still, learning the intricacies of that trunk. But they pick up sort of a bit of muscle movement and memory in that trunk at around 6 to 8 months of age, and then it takes them several years to master the art of manoeuvring that around. And it's pretty much nature's ultimate multi-tool. It's a knife, a fork, a spoon, a straw, all in one. And anything that an elephant eats or drinks is processed by the trunk and then put into the mouth for consumption. So they don't drink directly through their trunk like some people think they do, but they will suck up the water and then blow it into their mouth, which is how they drink. And then obviously you can see Sabai there, or how they process those pineapple plants, the tearing bits off with the help of their mouth into manageable pieces to be put into the mouth to be then chewed up by 4 massive molar teeth that they have in operation at any one time. Their dentition is quite fascinating. We're going to get 2 sets of teeth during our lifetime, but elephants get 6 sets of molar teeth. So they have 4 teeth, or 4 molars in operation, 1 each side, top and bottom, and then these are replaced regularly throughout their lifespan as the older molar starts to wear out from all of that food that they need to consume on a daily basis. And they start to grow in the back of the jaw and push forward almost like on a conveyor belt system, horizontally start to push out that older molar, which breaks off, chips off, and then falls out to be replaced by that new tooth that will serve them well. In older elephants like Porntip and Tongdi, their molars will last around 12 to 15 years or so. And then at around 55, 65 years of age, when they wear out that last set of molars, depending on their diet and where they live, for example, because some food in some regions is much harsher on their molars than others, around 55, 65, unfortunately, they're unable to process the large amounts of food they require because of those worn molars, and they start to slowly lose body condition and eventually pass away. And that's nature's way of moving on older elephants from the population to be replaced by younger females who take on the leadership or matriarch roles of the herd, or younger males like Lukchai or Paddy Hahn, who eventually in decades move their way up the hierarchy of bulls in a specific region or territory to become the more sort of dominant breeding bulls that then start to father a lot of the calves in those areas. And a bull sort of doesn't hit his real prime until sort of early 40s or so. So, elephants like Sabai and Paddy Hahn have a long time to wait before they get to the top of the tree in that hierarchy. And of course, the most famous of elephant teeth are, of course, their tusks. As I mentioned earlier, one of the big differences between Asian and African elephants, and there are many, is that with African elephants, both males and females grow those large white prominent tusks, but with Asian elephants, it's only the males or a certain percentage of males that grow those tusks. The females do not grow them. These tusks are made up of a compound called dentine, which we refer to as ivory. And ivory, unfortunately, has been revered and cherished by humans for thousands of years. We've used it to make things like billiard balls, piano keys, sculptures, figurines, musical instruments, signature seals, even things as small and trivial as chopsticks. And unfortunately, our obsession with ivory has resulted in the deaths of millions and millions of elephants throughout history. One of the advantages, as I mentioned, to Asian elephants is the females do not have those tusks. So you might be thinking that the poaching and targeting of Asian elephants would be less than African elephants, and to a point that is true. But both species have sort of various things that have reduced their population dramatically. Around 100 years ago, there were about 5 to 7 million African elephants on that continent. Today, that number unfortunately has fallen to about 390,000. To some people, that may still seem like quite a large number, but 1/3 of those elephants just live in one small African landlocked country called Botswana in southern Africa. So when you put the remaining 2/3 throughout the entire continent, you can start to get a sense of how fragmented and reduced their overall population is. So that population continues to decline in many parts of Africa, West, Central and East Africa. Southern African elephants are doing okay at this time, but are certainly very vulnerable to poaching for those ivory tusks, which has been a big problem that has unfortunately there's been a scourge of illegal poaching in the last sort of 15 years or so, which has resulted in the deaths of around 30,000 African elephants every single year to supply that black market trade for ivory. With Asian elephants, the big problem for them is not necessarily poaching, although it does happen from time to time. The big problem is the total or almost total loss of their forest habitat to survive. There are only 34,000 Asian elephants that live in the wild throughout the entire continent. They're found in 13 countries, and in 5 of those 13 countries, so almost half, the population in those countries is now less than 200. And the age sort of demographics of those herds and the lack of calves being born unfortunately means that in 20 years or so they are very, very unlikely to be found in half of the countries that they're found in today. And that 34,000 sort of eke out a living sort of in the very small and very small number of protected areas that remain, but they obviously leave those protected areas a lot of the time and therefore come into conflict with people almost on a daily and nightly basis. And that results in the deaths of hundreds and hundreds of people and elephants every year throughout Asia. It's an increasing problem in Africa also, in a problem called human-elephant conflict, and over sort of planted food crops and water resources that we've now sort of earmarked for our own uses. And that is obviously having a continual and devastating effect on the declining population. So it's very, very hard and difficult to see where or how that Asian elephant population in the wild will increase in the years to come. Now, I will finish the talk there for those who do want to continue their journey along the circuit today and see some of the animals that we have out here in Dubbo. So from myself, the elephant team and a herd of Asian elephants, thanks for taking a little bit of time out of your day and taking an interest in our herd and in Asian elephants in general. And from us all, we hope you enjoy the rest of your sunny day here at Taronga Western Plains Zoo.